Last week I talked a bit about sleeping and meditating into and in sleep states. So this week maybe we'll talk about meditation while you're awake. Of course, the whole goal of the meditation is to wake up completely. And meditation is something that can be done in any posture. Particularly, I wanted to talk about posture and how to hold the body in meditation. There are the four classic postures: sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. We associate meditation mostly with sitting and secondarily with walking, but that's kind of a customary thing that has arisen. It's actually the four postures. Sitting is probably of the four the ideal posture for deep meditation because the body is held in such a way that it's possible to remain alert and awake easily, but it's not stressful or energetic on the body. It takes some practice to get to the point of being able to sit easily. It's a very common thing for beginning meditators to have difficulties with the body and to experience stress and pain in the body as being a major issue. A large part of this arises simply from the fact of sitting still. The quality of dukkha, universal characteristic of dukkha in the body, suffering in the body, is a universal. The fact that you have a human body means it's going to hurt. There's no way of avoiding that. Human bodies are full of suffering. Of the three characteristics, suffering is said to be hidden by change of postures. That's why it's not evident all the time, is because we fidget it away. If you're not trying to sit still, the ordinary person will change their posture every few minutes. If someone's sitting watching TV or reading a book or relaxing at home, sitting in their easy chair, every few minutes they'll recross their legs or lean on the other elbow or shift their weight. And this doesn't make an end of suffering, it just shifts it about. So you get it's like change is as good as a rest. You get a new constellation of dukkha, so it feels all right for a while until it starts to bite in. And if you begin meditating, you've never meditated before, you begin meditating, the first time you've been fully awake and conscious and trying to sit completely motionless for an extended period of time, the sufferings that are naturally inherent in the body because of the imperfection of the sense-desire realm, it's just the fact of having a bodily form, become evident and begins to feel like unendurable stress. Getting past that point of suffering in the body is a major step in developing good meditation. And there are things you can do to work on your posture. You can do various kind of stretches in yoga, particularly to open the hips, which are in Western culture, we've all grown up with ruined hip joints from sitting in chairs all the time. And the hips don't open properly. So people in Thailand, if they grew up in a traditional home, they don't have chairs. They sit on the floor from childhood. They have no trouble sitting cross-legged or postured like that because their hips are loose. You probably don't feel it in the hips. You might feel it in the knees or in the back. Because the hips aren't open, it causes the stress on the other parts of the body. So there's that. You can work on that. And you can work on refining your posture. It's very important to keep the spine straight. Sometimes it feels short-term better to slouch, but that just puts more stress on the spine, and you will suffer more later from slouching. If you make the effort to sit straight from the beginning, you'll be better off. So there's all these things and more that you can do to train the bodily form to reduce the stress, but you'll never eliminate it in the body. And getting past the point where suffering is an issue is more of a mental thing. You get to the point not where you make an end of the suffering, the pain in the body, but you get to the point where it doesn't matter to you anymore. You just carry on regardless. You get to the point where you don't allow it to be an issue. So my leg hurts, so what? It's just a sensation, and you just carry on. It's kind of a general thing with physical pain that there's two components to it. There's the physical pain itself, pain from illness or injury or just general wear and tear on the body. That's a sensation, physical feeling, physical sensation, tactile sense. And then on top of that, there's the mental reaction to it. And that is the component that is actually optional. You don't have to give into that. The physical pain is a given, it's there. Okay, that's something we have to deal with, but then the mental reaction multiplies the suffering if you allow yourself to fall into this kind of self-pity, whinging, oh, why me, this hurts, oh my goodness, that multiplies the feeling of the pain, multiplies the suffering. The actual feeling of the pain remains the same, but it multiplies the suffering. If you get to the point where it doesn't matter, the physical pain can be there, but you don't care. Somebody came up with something they call the Ohm's law of suffering. I don't know where this originated. It's gone kind of thrown around Buddhist circles. If you don't know, Ohm's law is an electrical formula. Volts equals amperage times resistance. And the Buddhist Ohm's law of suffering is suffering equals pain times resistance. So if you think about the math of that, if your resistance, the mental whinging, is zero, then the suffering is zero, even with a very high pain level. You'd have to be an Arahant or a Buddha to be at that point, but if your resistance is very low, then even with high pain, the suffering will be low. If you're a big baby and whine about a bumped finger, then the even a very tiny physical pain can be a great suffering, because you allow yourself to fall into self-pity and kind of wallowing in the feeling. So there's that, dealing with the body and sensations in the body is most important, just not to let it be an issue. One kind of particular variation that comes up in meditation, people sitting cross-legged complain about pins and needle sensations in the legs after sitting, and then legs go numb. That's really nothing to complain about. If your legs go numb, that's a bonus. You don't feel them anymore. Just let them go. If you get the pins and needles, just disregard it, carry on, and then your leg will go completely numb, and you're not bothered with it again for the rest of the hour. Sitting posture, the kind of classic ideal posture is full lotus with each foot on its opposite thigh, back straight, and there's different mudras for holding the hands. The classic meditation mudra in Theravada is left hand in the lap and right hand on the left and thumbs lightly touching. The only part of that that I think is really important is the back. You're holding the back upright, but not rigid, not stiff, but in a relaxed, upright manner. I like the analogy that is in the Visuddhimagga. Imagine your spine is loose like a pile of coins, and if they're stacked properly, they won't fall over. The vertebrates are aligned, so the center of gravity is running down the spine. It's not pulling you from side to side or forward or backward. You're not fighting gravity. You're aligned with it. The cross-legged posture has the advantage, if you're able to do it comfortably enough, then it's very stable and it's balanced. It's very balanced. If you can't quite manage the full lotus, there's the half lotus, the 1 foot on the opposite thigh, or quarter lotus, 1 foot on the opposite calf. And those are almost as good as full lotus. Be careful you don't overdo it with the crossed legs and strain the knees. You can injure the knees if you force yourself to hold that posture and there's pain in the knees. You should unlock, release the legs. Knees are delicate. If you can't manage sitting like that, then sitting in a chair is an option. It's not always easy to find the ideal chair. The ideal for sitting in a chair is that you're supporting the lower back and not the upper back. So if you're sitting in a straight back chair and you put a rolled up towel or hard cushion behind your back just over the hips, and your shoulders are not touching the chair at all, that's the ideal for meditation. That will hold the spine in a good posture. What's actually a very good compromise is sitting on the floor with your back against the wall and use that cushion above the hips to support the lower back. That's what I like to do when I'm having back trouble, which I get periodically. I like to sit against a wall with a cushion over my hips. Standing posture is a good alternate posture that's kind of not talked about as much. There are standing Buddha statues. They're not as common as the sitting ones, but it's one of the 4 classic postures. One should stand with the feet a little bit apart so that the weight of the body is distributed evenly. The feet sort of underneath the shoulders so that the body's all aligned, and stand in an upright manner. The hands can be held, one can hold the other in front of the body, or you can hang them down the side. Standing posture can be useful if you're in sitting meditation, if you're falling asleep a lot. If you're having a difficulty with being dull, then stand up instead. Or some people like to stand up if they're on a retreat and they're doing a lot of sitting and they're having a lot of trouble with the body, and they just want to kind of break in the posture. They'll stand up and meditate standing. Walking meditation is very commonly done in Thailand. In the Thai forest tradition, puts a lot of emphasis on walking meditation. Calling it walking meditation is sort of a misnomer. It's not a particular meditation. It's a meditation posture. You can do any number of variety of meditations while walking. It's just that we're talking about the posture. And that can vary a little bit depending on the meditation you're doing. Sometimes you want to walk very slowly. You generally would want to walk a little slower than normal, but some meditations where you're particularly focusing on the sensations of the feet, for example, Vipassana meditation, you'll want to walk very slowly. And basically, as a rule, is if the emphasis is on the body and on walking. You can walk and do a totally different meditation. You can walk and meditate on kasina, or doing a mantra, or any number of meditations, and then the particular style of walking isn't so critical. But if your focus is on the movement of the body or on the sensations in the feet, you probably want to walk one step at a time, which is a little bit of an unnatural walk. If you're walking in an ordinary, natural way, the left foot starts to lift off the floor before the right foot is finished coming down. So both feet are changing at the same time. If you're doing the walking meditation, you leave the left foot flat on the floor until the right foot is completely flat. Then you lift it and move. So it's one foot at a time. And that can seem a little odd at first, and you might feel like you're losing your balance now and again, but just stay with it, and you pick it up pretty quickly. The ideal walking path is 25 or 30 feet long. You want to pick a path that's flat and level, smooth. If you know you're going to be doing walking meditation every day, you can even prepare a path, scrape it with a rake and clear it, and even spread some gravel or sawdust on it to make a nice smooth surface. Ajahn Mahabua, in his teachings, he always said that one should pick a path to walk that's aligned north and south, and never walk east to west. I haven't encountered that particular injunction anywhere else. It's a peculiarity of Ajahn Mahabua, I think, and his tradition. And there's been a lot of speculation amongst people as to why he said that. And I'll just throw in my own 2 cents, my own guess. The only thing I can think of that would make sense is that he was so sensitive that walking east to west, he felt a disturbance by crossing the magnetic lines of the earth. And only by walking north and south was that avoided. Be that as it may, I'll just throw that out there. This is another thing, you cannot always get the ideal situation for walking. If the weather's bad, you're forced to walk indoors, it may be too short, just make do. Work with whatever you have. I'm just talking about an ideal. If everything else is equal and you have the complete choice of space, this is supposed to be the ideal. It's also something that Thai Ajahns say, all of them say that you shouldn't do walking meditation with your hands behind your back. So that you're not doing walking meditation, you're going for a stroll. The hands are ideally in front of you, held one and held in the other. Something that I when I'm doing walking meditation, something I find helpful, they avoid the kind of a little easier, physically easier, avoid a little bit of the stress on the shoulders. That's something I can take advantage of because of the way our robes are constructed. I've got I can't see it with my outer robe on, but the belt and then the lower robe, it makes a sort of a knot in front of me at about belly button level, and I can put my hand in that knot and rest it, and then it kind of takes the weight. Well, you can do that with a cloth or a belt around your waist if you're having trouble with your shoulders. Just have something supporting your hands. It's good when you get to the end of your walking path to maintain mindfulness. You can turn around slowly. And one thing that you can do, it goes particularly well with Vipassana meditations, but you could do it at any time if you find it helpful, is after you turn around, stop, stand, and then do a body sweep. Run the consciousness down the surface of the body and ground them in the feet again before you start walking. Meditating lying down is the fourth posture. And we talked about last week meditating going to sleep, doing that lying in the lion's posture, which is on the right side. If you want to meditate lying down, it's considered to be the most difficult posture because of the tendency to fall asleep. It's too easy on the body. But if you're extremely wakeful, you have no trouble, you can use that as a meditation posture. It's the easiest on the body in that sense. There is a practical issue. If you're doing the classical pose, is the lion's posture, lying on your right side, and you prop the head up on the hand. And if you do that, you'll find that's very difficult to hold for long because it's quite stressful on the wrist and the elbow as well. You start to feel that all going really wonky after about, at the most, maybe 15, 20 minutes. There's a couple of things. You can use that if you're doing a lot of meditation and the body's getting stiff and you don't want to stop meditating, but you want to relax the body, then you can lie on the right side with your head propped up for 15 minutes or so before the arm starts to go, and give your body a rest. If you want to meditate longer in the lying posture, you'd have to modify it as a practical thing. And if you're trying to go to sleep, if you're meditating going to sleep, you would have the arm flat and the head on the hand, or even the hand under the pillow if you like to have a pillow. But that's so relaxing you would tend to go to sleep. So you have to try to find some way to modify it so you can be relaxed but not sleep. So this is why it's said, to be a difficult posture to meditate in. So those are the four classic postures. But, and before I leave that topic, I should mention one other thing, is that a very important moment is change of postures. If you're alternating walking and sitting, to remain mindful during the change from walking to sitting. That's why if you're on a retreat, or if you're just doing an extended period of meditation, you're alternating walking, sitting, it's good advice to do the walking first and then the sitting, and to make the transition from walking to sitting as smooth as possible, as mindful as possible. So if you've got any little business to do, go to the toilet or have a drink of water, do that at the beginning of the walking period and get it out of the way. And don't break the meditation when you change from walking to sitting. And if you're walking out of doors and you're sitting indoors, then come inside 10 minutes or so early and walk a little bit inside before you sit down. So you try not to break in between walking and sitting. You try to make that transition continuous. That's very helpful. The Buddha said that concentration built while walking lasts a long time, because attaining states of samadhi is more difficult in walking while there's so much more distraction. And whatever level of samadhi you attain while walking, if you take it into the more restrained sitting posture, it feels really on. You feel meditation is going really well. So you don't want to waste it, dissipate it by breaking in between walking and sitting, fussing around or doing anything. Just carry it through. But really, the principle should be that you can be mindful in any posture and at all times. The distinction between meditation and not meditation is a kind of an arbitrary one. Meditation is something we do when we set up the externals in an artificial way to make it as easy as possible to be mindful, which means sitting still in a quiet place or walking in a restrained way on a quiet, flat meditation walk and so forth. We're making the externals as simple as possible so that the mind can attain deeper states. And that's an exercise that's extremely important, very useful to do, but it's not by itself the whole of the path. We should be trying to be mindful and awake during our other actions of the day, in all postures at all times, whatever we're doing. And that becomes easier if one's done the more formal, restrained, sitting, walking meditation. Then it becomes more easy to be mindful during the day in other activities. But that's the real test and importance of the practice. Somebody said it's no use being liberated if you're only awake on the cushion. You have to be able to get up off the cushion and carry on and be mindful during your other activities, which are then everything will go better for you. Anything you try your hand at will be better done and smoother, and you'll be happier. You can encourage this state of mindfulness during the day by using various moments during the day to go back into a deeper state of meditation. For example, you're walking someplace, just instead of letting your mind run ahead to your destination, try to be mindful of the act of walking. Turn that into a kind of walking meditation. You're sitting waiting for a few minutes. You're driving your car, you're sitting at the red light, or you're on your computer and you're waiting for the piece of software to download. You can just do breathing meditation for a minute, 2 minutes, whatever. Well, that's quite useful. That keeps you centered. And whatever activity you're doing, if you're engaged in any sort of task, it's obvious if your mind is on what you're doing, it's going to be better done. It's the one of the iddhipadas, is the roads to success, is the chitta, is having the mind engaged with what's happening. This is the opposite of multitasking. This is unitasking, right? Whatever you do, you do it. You're just hauling wood, chopping water. Before enlightenment, hauling wood, chopping water. After enlightenment, hauling wood, chopping water. So Zen saying, you just do what you're doing. And being aware of all satipatthanas, the four foundations of mindfulness. There's the body, the feelings, the mental contents, and the mind. Being aware of the body is something that we can sometimes lose. I remember some years ago when I was a junior monk at Wat Pah Nanachat, I took on a job for the monastery on the computer, and I was doing some tricky thing on the computer. I was actually writing a programming a database to handle the foreign monks' visa forms, and it got to be very involved and tricky. And I spent like a couple hours on the computer playing with different configurations, and then I stopped to take a break, and I immediately realized I urgently had to urinate. I know that's something I must have been building for some time before. I was totally unaware of it because I wasn't in my body at all. I was not aware of my body. I was missing that satipatthana, that particular one. But being aware of the body is not everything. That's one of the four foundations. You have to also be aware of your feelings, which are the Vedanas, the pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. You have to be aware when things are painful, when they're pleasant, and when they're neutral. This might be part of repetitive strain injury, that people screen out the painful sensation to just keep going with the job until it gets, damage is done. They're not aware of painful sensation. We're also talking about painful and pleasant mental states, the emotional reaction to things one should be aware of. If you're not aware of painful sensation, mental sensation, this is how irritation builds up, right? You just don't pay attention to it, you don't notice it, and then the irritation builds up until it becomes an explosion. You get angry. But if you're aware of the unpleasant sensation, you can deal with it while it's still just a minor thing. Being aware of mental contents is very, very important. To be aware of your own mind, to have your thoughts and so forth conscious. You shine the light of consciousness on. Don't sweep things under the rug. Let the mind be fully aware and conscious. That's something that I think is a major difference between the Buddhist psychological theory, in the Abhidhamma, and some versions of Western psychology, particularly anything Freudian. There's the idea in the Freudian model of the mind that there's an unconscious or a subconscious that's going on simultaneously with the conscious mind. Because the Abhidhamma idea is that mind is unitary. There's only mind and an object. There's not two streams going on at once. So what we call the unconscious or subconscious is just stuff that's going on that you're not looking at. So at that moment you're not conscious. You're either afraid or too lazy or whatever it is to be fully aware of that thought process. So it's not registered, it's not conscious. So someone like an Arahant or a Buddha, there'd be no such thing in any sense of an unconscious. The mind is fully awake all the time. And being aware of the quality of the mind. This is the fourth satipatthana, is being aware of the state of mind. You might say, is the mind bright? Is it dull? Is it awake? Is it sleepy? Is it energized? Is it full of desire? Is it free of desire? These are states of mind. The more conscious you are, the more awake you are, the closer you are to a state of Buddhahood, the more liberated you are. So the more at ease you are, the more in control you are. So one of the qualities of an Arahant is they only think what they want to think and not what they don't want to think. Now if you're trying to meditate and you're having difficulty, you notice the mind can run around, we call it monkey mind. The mind can run around with thoughts and plans and daydreams or fears and anxieties, just running all over the place. For the person who's not fully awake, the mind seems uncontrollable. And the process is taming the mind so that gradually you bring it under control. You don't let it run around loose like that. The Buddha compared it to taming a wild elephant. The way the Buddha came from his family, came from the Khattiya class, so he was a warrior noble. So a lot of his analogies are sort of things that would occur to the mind of a warrior noble of the day. One of them was how the kings would train an elephant for royal service. You get a wild elephant and you chain it to a stake in the ground. And at first the elephant will rage and bellow and storm and try to get off the chain. And after a while it'll calm down more and it'll just pace around in a circle around the chain. And then at some point it'll just lie down peacefully beside the stake. Then it's suitable for service and you can take the chain off. And he said that the wild elephant is like the untamed mind. The stake is like the object of meditation, and the chain is mindfulness. You have to make the effort of mindfulness. So at first, the mind is just raging and trying to get away, but you try to keep it bound by going back to the object again and again. And at some point, you'll be able to maintain yourself within a field of mindfulness that might not be perfect, but you're pacing around the object. You're not going too far from it. And then the mind will reach that state of unity where you're just with the object. And no effort is required at that point. It's just locked in. So we're working at making the mind awake and malleable, controllable. This is malleable like gold. This is another analogy the Buddha uses, that the gold is an amazing element and would be used a lot more if it wasn't so expensive and rare, because it's got so many amazing qualities. It's extremely plastic, it's malleable, you can do anything with it. And so gold leaf, for example, they make it by rolling gold through big heavy rollers, and you can get it just a few molecules thick. Make very thin sheets of gold. It's also highly electrically conductive, and if it wasn't so expensive, it would be better to use than copper for electrical wiring. And they do use it in microchips for that reason. But the Buddha compares, training the mind is to working with gold. Like you have raw gold that's been mined is full of impurities. It's mixed with other elements, and the goldsmith melts it and beats it and works it until it gets to be pure, and then he can do whatever he likes with it. It's extremely malleable. It's like the mind. We work with it to train it, tame it. Sometimes the process is said as to be three steps: know the mind, shape the mind, and free the mind. And this is you can see that working in if we're trying to work with some particular issue in the mind, some particular defilement or habit that we're trying to see in the mind. And the first thing is to know it, to clearly see it. I know you, Mara. Clearly see this object. Not to run away from it or hide it or pretend it's not there, but to see it clearly. And then you can take the second step of beginning to try and tame it, change it, shift it. And the mind is free when it's done with. So whatever defilements are present in the mind, they can be trained and transmuted and become liberated from. This process of transmutation is thinking of the analogy of gold. This is it's like a Western tradition of alchemy. You're working with various elements and transmuting them. And there is in the Visuddhimagga, there's a lot of talk about. There's a section that talks about personality types, and this section is really intended for people who teach meditation to recognize and how to deal with different personality types. And it gets refined pretty much, but there's 3 basic types depending on your root defilement, whether desire, aversion, or delusion is strongest in an individual. And they unfold differently as they mature spiritually. The person whose desire is their primary defilement, their spiritual unfoldment often comes through the faith faculty. Sensual urges transmute into a love of chanting and beautiful flowers on the altar, and their heart opens. It's like a heart opening. The person whose primary defilement is aversion, they tend to unfold through the mind, through the rationality. There's that kind of impatience and anger. This is then begins to be turned on, an impatience with being ignorant, and an impatience with not understanding, with not knowing. And the mind wants to penetrate and break up and understand the reality. And people whose delusion is their primary defilement, they are said to unfold through psychic powers, which is an interesting one. They develop the psychic powers more easily than anyone else. And I have seen examples of this, but I think the way it works, my kind of theory of how that works is that someone who's not got a firm grip on reality, the sort of person who wonders, oh, did I dream that, or is it real? When something occurs out of the ordinary, like if they have an intuition, or they believe they're hearing someone else's thoughts, they have more tendency to believe that. So they might nurture that seed, and they might develop a power. Whereas a more sort of, quotes unquote, rational person, something like that occurs to their mind, they just dismiss it. Oh, it's just my imagination. That's just silly. And they just carry on with what they're doing and ignore it. And they never nurture that seed within themselves. Yeah. So there's different ways that, the different defilements are transmuted, and the being unfolds into the light, into wakefulness, into Buddha nature from different angles, in different ways. So it's not really one size fits all. Kind of wandered a little bit from my initial topic, but I think I'll leave it at that then.